Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our publishing and coaching services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Mark Gibbs, author of Absolute Beginner's Guide to Networking. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Are you ready to get started?
I am.
All right, question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
It will take longer than you think, and quite often much longer. But I have two other pieces of advice. Be prepared to rewrite at least twice, and that is at least twice, and be prepared to get very depressed. Drinking may help, but your big challenge is that when you take on a book, most people, in my experience, get to a point where they doubt what they're doing, and it's that point where you think, oh, it's just not worth it. I'm never going to get anywhere with this. It's not turning out the way I want. And that's why rewriting is so important. I coached somebody in writing an autobiography. And when we started, she said, well, how do I write? And I said, you put down words on paper and you keep doing that until you get to the end. And she got better as she wrote, and she actually finished the book. And she said, what do I do now? And I said, now you rewrite it, because you're a different author than when you first started this book. This is advice for people who haven't written a lot, but in her case, we actually turned it into a blog, and she broke it up into pieces, posts for a blog. And when she'd finished that, then I forced her to do a third rewrite to actually publish it. And she got depressed in this cycle, but part of it is you have to believe in what you're doing. And if you really stop believing in it, if you really get to the point where like, this is never going to work, you may be onto something, you may be right, and maybe you should start over completely. But that kind of process seems to be what most authors go through.
And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
Figuring out the mechanics. It used to be pretty easy. Back when I was writing it was in the late 90s, you could go to a publisher and pitch a book and negotiate your own contract. Today, if you actually go to a traditional publisher, well, you can't. You have to have an agent, and getting an agent is a whole task in and of itself. Now, if you're not going to go down the traditional publishing route, then you need a strategy to get published. It's figuring out the mechanics. The mechanics are totally different because the channels of self-publishing have become very complicated, and whatever you choose has got to be something where you understand where you're going to with it, what it's going to cost you, and just how to make it work.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many little pieces involved anytime you're getting published.
Oh yeah, I mean, right, for everything from, the formatting to, well, what are you going to do about PR for it? What are you going to do about managing the flow of questions that you might get? I've known people who've published things and then just really never paid enough attention to reader feedback. And one of the things that reader feedback gives you is an insight into whether your book is actually fitting their expectations and what new marketing opportunities you might have.
Absolutely. Well, and speaking of marketing, what I'd like to ask is for you to please share a marketing strategy that you've used in your book launch that worked well.
Well, mostly, I haven't written a book for some years now. The people I've helped, giving away the book in pieces, that's a really good strategy. If you have an abridged version of your book, where you still manage to retain whatever the core excitement of the book is, but you're not giving away the entire story. It leaves people wanting more. If you can pull that off, that's a great way to get people interested. Also, if you blog the content, as I said, the writer that I helped write her book, by having a blog, she had the opportunity to present the story in pieces, and that's a very different experience than actually having a book in your hands, whether it's a digital book or a physical book. The one thing that I could never persuade her to do was to really work on her marketing. Like a lot of people, she was very, very resistant to actually putting in the effort to promote her own work. And this is I would say, if you're not willing to put in the effort to promoting your own work, you probably shouldn't be bothering if you intend to make any financial success out of this. You know, there's only two reasons to write. You're either writing for love or money. If you're writing for love, it really doesn't matter how you do it. You can choose any path you like, because you're not as interested in the consequences, the financial consequences. If you're writing for money, you have to have strategy behind you. You have to have a plan that's going to get you from a load of words in a digital document to whatever format is going to be in somebody's hands that they're going to either pay you for or pay you for something derivative from that work. So it's very important that you actually have a plan and that you intend to make this a success.
Yeah, systems and frameworks are key, and it's the big difference between having a hobby and running your book like a business to be successful.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. It's been a slight obsession of mine for forever. I to the point where I've spent stupid amounts of money buying exotic copies of Alice's Adventures. And the thing about Alice that has always impressed me is that if you think of when Charles Dodgson wrote that book, it was so, even for its time, it was an unusual book. And he just wrote it. He had the faith in telling this story, that the story would work. And when you actually read how it's been put together, he was a very picky person. He was not at all easy to get along with. And the first illustrator of Alice, whose name I'm blanking on, damn it, they actually argued endlessly over the illustrations. And to an extent, what I think you learn from that is that you have to have vision. That vision in what you're writing and where you're taking it is pretty much everything.
Absolutely. And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
Well, from Alice, in the Mock Turtle story, there's a quote which is, "I don't see how, excuse me, I don't see how he can ever finish if he doesn't begin." And I'll give you a second one, which is from chapter 12 in Alice's Evidence. "Begin at the beginning," the king said very gravely, "and go until you come to the end, then stop." And if you want to put, if you want to gild the lily here, for all the Star Wars fans out there, from The Empire Strikes Back, do or do not, there is no try.
Good old Yoda.
Yep.
Well, Mark, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
They can write to me at mgibbs@gibbs.com. That's MGIBBS at GIBBS.com. They can also, they could go to my website, although there's not a ton to see there because most of the content is client content that's, shall we say, hidden. That's gibbs.com.
Well, Mark, thank you once again for being a guest on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com. getpublished.com.